This is the Academic Survival Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Shandra McDonald. Statistics show that approximately 40% of students drop out of college every year. In fact, nearly 30% drop out their first year. Well, I am on a mission to improve these stats.
I do this activity with my students where we imagine that big thing that you want to be, regardless of titles, regardless of what people are telling you you can and can't do, because I want students to know that to be your center. Because there's going to be a lot in our STEM field, especially if you're Black and brown, that's going to external factors that are going to push against you, that are going to tell you you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you don't have what it takes. All of that is BS, but I would not be Auntie Jess if I did not tell you as students that that is going to happen. But stand strong that you belong to be in STEM. And if you're wanting to do that, again, don't skimp on your math and find your mentors, find your village.
Today on the Academic Survival Podcast, I have with me astrophysicist Jessica A. Harris. From mentee to mentor, Auntie Jess shares her personal journey in STEM as a Black woman. She shares her experience working on the James Webb Space Telescope project, and she highlights the importance of representation in inspiring underrepresented communities to pursue careers in science. So be open to the twists and turns of your journey and tune in to learn more about the challenges and triumphs of pursuing a career in STEM. Hello and welcome to the Academic Survival Podcast. Today I have with me astrophysicist Jessica A. Harris. I am so excited to have her here. Jessica, welcome to the Academic Survival Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Yay. So tell me where you went to school and what your major was.
Yes. So I went to school at Grambling State University in Louisiana. And when I started my freshman year, I had declared my major to be secondary education with a concentration in math, meaning I wanted to be a high school math teacher. So ever since I was a little girl, if you asked me what I wanted to be, didn't matter how old I was, I would always tell you that I wanted to be a teacher. So when I went off to college, I declared that I wanted to be a high school teacher teaching math.
So you get to Grambling State, you wanted to be a math teacher, and that changed along the way. So what happened there?
Yes, absolutely. So I ran into an amazing mentor who last week, it was 17 years since his passing, but he was teaching a physics class for non-STEM majors. And so if you were taking classes, they were different, like physics classes you can take, one for non-science majors and then one for if you were on the STEM track. And he really wanted me to switch over into physics, and I was not thinking about it at all, was never even on my mind to be a physics major. But he was in a program that had funding, which was really appealing to me because I was a first generation student and didn't have scholarships. I had some scholarships going in, but the fact that he was saying that I would have scholarships for books and different things I was really interested in. So he really invested in me my freshman year, all throughout my freshman year. I know I met him during one class. I think I just stayed in contact with him, and he ended up introducing me to my first internship with a colleague of his at Duke University. And it was at Duke that I decided to switch my major over into physics.
So you were essentially on what we would call a STEM track because you wanted to be a math teacher. So, so switching over to physics, how long of a process was that for you to make that decision?
So I just wanted to say that the way that Grambling had it, even though I was wanting to teach math, it was still more in the education school. So it wasn't a STEM track at that time.
Oh, okay.
It was still just an education track. So it wasn't even on a math track. And so if you had to statistically, which is true, if you look at the number of people who were declaring their majors going into undergrad being in science, like I wouldn't have been a part of that number because I declared it to be in education, not in science, even though I went to teach science. So I would say the switch happened within 1 year. So one full So I had fall, spring, and then the summertime is when I made my decision to switch over into physics. But even when I did switch it into physics, I still was thinking that I still wanted to be a teacher. But all the advice that I had received that summer from people that were in the field, where if you really, really want to teach a STEM major, become the expert in the science, and then you can always go back to learn the educational pieces of how to teach it, but really understanding the concepts were really hard. And so that held me into my path of becoming a physicist.
What are you doing now with this background?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really hard to answer that without telling the story,
Well,
but
tell
do
the
you want
story. That's what we're here
okay.
for. Yeah.
I tell you the story, or do I have to just tell you what I'm doing?
No,
It's very
tell the story.
okay. So the story is I want to give homage to my mentor who poured into me is Dr. Tang Zhu. And I only knew him. I was just thinking about this recently because I did my Auntie Just Corner. I was talking about him and I'm looking up at him right now. There's a picture of him I have in my house. And I think about how he invested so much in me in the 2 years that I knew him that I'm still talking about him 17 years later.
Wow.
I decided to major in physics. I graduated. I was the only person that graduated that year from Grambling State University in physics. And during my time at Grambling, I had several internships, and my last internship was at Vanderbilt University, and it was in astronomy. And I always had a knack for astronomy, just curiosity for it. I think most of us do, even if we don't want to major in it, because we see the night sky and it's amazing. And just recently, Venus and Jupiter were in the night sky. And so people were messaging me like, what is that? What's going on? Yes, you can see the planets, which is really amazing. And when I was a little girl, my grandfather used to always take us camping in Oregon. And when you go camping and there's not a lot of light pollution, you can really see the night sky.
Yeah.
My grandfather was the first person that taught me like the constellations and just all the different kind of constellations. And so when I had an opportunity to go to Vanderbilt to major in astronomy, I was like, okay, because you're thinking about next steps. I was on track to go into a PhD program, which is really amazing. I want to give advice to those that are listening for students that if you're in STEM in some way or fashion, you should not be paying for your degrees. And so when I switched over into physics, there was a program that I got to be a part of that paid for my rest of my undergrad and also was interesting. That's why I went to Fisk University, a part of the Fisk Vanderbilt Bridge Master's to PhD program. I learned about it when I was at an internship at Vanderbilt that summer. And so when I graduated from Grambling State University, I left Louisiana to go to Tennessee, and I got my master's at Fisk University, but the research that I did was with a professor at Vanderbilt. So I'll pause if you have any things you want to ask as I continue the story.
Well, I don't want it to disrupt your flow, but you said that if you are a STEM major, you should not be paying for your degree.
Yes. Statistically, there's just not a lot of Black or brown or indigenous people that are getting their degrees. And a lot of programs are investing in making sure specifically that Black students, if you're wanting it, and then this is very niche, going into physics, they're wanting to pay for you to get that degree. And so look for programs that will support undergrads. If you're Black, you're brown, or indigenous, please look for opportunities or universities that will pay for you. So I have 2 degrees that I did not pay for because there were programs that were wanting to increase the number of Black students getting their degrees in physics and astronomy. And so I didn't pay for a degree. I didn't pay for both my degrees. So there are scholarships out here.
That is fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I always want to share that because I know it can be a struggle. In undergrad, I always joke around that my parents made just enough, but not enough to pay for me independently to go to college. And so scholarships really became a big part of my journey. And had I not been a part of the programs I was a part of, I don't know if I would have continued financially to pay for it. So
no, that's a really good tip. Thank you.
Yeah, wanted to share that. I always forget because I'm in this all the time and I'm around people all the time. I often forget that people don't know that you should make sure that your programs are paying for you to be a part of their programs.
Wow.
So my job in school was to be in school and to study. So just wanted to share that, and happy if there's others that want to connect. I know my information will be shared. Happy to share with you programs that I know of that you could be a part of. So yeah, I went to Fisk University, like I said, in Nashville. It's a part of the Fisk Vanderbilt Master's to PhD program. This is master's. I always tell people that master programs are great if you're not sure or you need a little bit more. You're not sure if you want to go into a PhD program or you're not quite ready to go into a PhD program. Master's programs are still a really great way to build up your skills, your expertise, gain a little bit of more chops underneath your belt, and then bridge on. And so the nature of that program was for students who are underrepresented, traditionally excluded within our field. And there was like cohorts of us that they brought together. And then you take classes at Fisk University, and you're also able to take classes at Vanderbilt University. So I took classes at both, and that's where I actually met my thesis advisor, who I got to work with, and we got to actually travel to Chile and South America and observe my favorite. I never have Orion in my background, but the Orion Nebula, which the Orion constellation is up now, which you can see it in the wintertime, but it's up, and we got to travel to see that. So I wanted to say, I didn't say this before, but again, a part of the programs that I joined and that I had funding for, they all had the main goal of increasing the number of students who are underrepresented in STEM to go to PhD. So this is going to be a big part of my story. So all the programs that I were in were to get me to PhD, Even this master's to PhD program. Again, it's a master's to PhD program. Right. Get you to PhD. And so in our STEM field, specifically in physics and in astronomy, like that is the marker that they always tell you to go to.
Okay.
And so remember, I had competing goals within my mind and my being, as I always knew I wanted to be an educator. Like that never wavered in what I was doing. And so when I went to my master's program, there were things that I saw that I just didn't like as much, like the grind of having to make your whole livelihood based on writing and applying for grants or different things. I'm like, I don't want to do this. And just to research the amount of hours that they expected you to work in a week, 50 to 60 plus hours, is something that I did not look forward to. And then the science, like when you get to be your master's and then you go from master's to PhD, you become really, really niched down into something very, very specific that only a few people in the world know. Okay. And I just didn't want to do that. So I made a decision not to continue on my PhD path, but I'll pause because there was a lot I just said there.
How are you with that decision?
I'm happy with my decision.
Good.
I want to share with students that it's important to really know what you want to do. Had I not known what I want to do, I wouldn't be where I am within my career. It was unconventional what I did, that I decided very consciously that I did not want to get a PhD. I do not regret that decision. I will never turn back from that decision. It was very thoughtful, but it was also at a time, as much as I'm content in that decision now, it took me years to be at peace, and not because I wasn't happy with my decision, but the system made me feel bad. Like when I graduated, I was one of the few that did not make this bridge into PhD. And so I felt like I had failed the program. I had failed every other program that had invested in me to be a PhD student because I decided that's not what I wanted to do. So just the shame I felt, maybe the feeling like I had disappointed other people. It took a long time to realize I hadn't disappointed people, and that's okay with the path that I chose. But it wasn't popular at the time to go into outreach like I did and build the career that I have for the last decade of my time. So though I'm content with it now and was content with it then, there were a lot of external factors that made me feel that maybe wasn't the best decision at the time. And that took years to really process and get over.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. You know, sometimes it does take a while to be content with the decision that you made, even though you can have a lot of peace about the decision. Other factors can start to weigh in. Well, I'm glad that you found the path that lights you up. So you're officially in what's called outreach?
So that was what my career has been for the last decade. Currently, I'm an independent entrepreneur in the moment, but I'm using within my business my expertise of being in education and public outreach and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then my Auntie Jess mentoring. So when
Awesome.
the kind of, to wrap up a little bit of my STEM journey, was that when I made that decision to leave Fisk University and to launch out to my career, there wasn't a path. Like, I had an internship, and there was nothing after I graduated. There was an internship, and then there was nothing planned after that other than I really wanted to be into outreach. And I was very fortunate that I ended up going to one of the blessed places that does education and public outreach in STEM at Space Telescope Science Institute. Went there for an internship, was fortunate enough to get called back on a project that I did on soft money for about 9 months. I had applied for a job at Space Telescope, actually didn't get the job, but was fortunate. What was great about not getting that job, which sounds really strange, was that I did so well in interviewing that they didn't want me to leave, and they created a position for me. So that
Oh,
launched
wow.
me into my outreach, my education and public outreach journey for, like I said, over the last decade. So I was at Space Telescope for 7 years, and I always have James Webb image, the image you always talk about, in my background, because I literally spent 7 years of my career talking about James Webb Space Telescope going to launch. It's this amazing telescope that did finally launch in 2021. So it's really exciting, but I don't want to geek out about James Webb because I can spend the whole rest of
No,
the
you
time
can
talking.
feel free to geek out. I want to have this science conversation, because there's students that are out there that could be connecting with it saying, yes, tell me more,
Yeah,
tell me more. So yeah, feel free to geek out.
yeah. So it's exciting. One thing I want to say is that I know I said it earlier, but I really want, if no one else gets anything from what I'm saying, is truly follow your passions, truly follow your desires, and be open to where the journey takes you. Like, I never had written in any of my books that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It just was never on my mind. It wasn't something I thought about, but that is the way my journey has landed to be. But if I was too set on my path, then I wouldn't have allowed the different twists and turns that I ended up on. So like I said, I went to Space Telescope and spent 7 years talking about James Webb, and I still light up about it because I got to be on the ground talking about James Webb Space Telescope before James Webb Space Telescope became a thing or became in national news, or before people really got to know about it. Like, I was on the ground going maybe 2-3 times a week, taking my infrared it wasn't my infrared telescope, but the department's infrared telescope, and packing up all my gear and taking it to classrooms for years. Imagine, like, I tried to do the math, but like hundreds and hundreds of talks that I gave. And what's exciting about James Webb Space Telescope is that it's seeing in a different wavelength of light than Hubble season. So Hubble, I always like to compare Hubble to James Webb because a lot of people do know about Hubble was launched in 1990, and it also sees in infrared, but not the whole spectrum. It primarily sees invisible wavelengths of light, and we've learned so much about Hubble and just the science. But what's really exciting about James Webb being launched, one, again, the journey. Like, when I first started talking about James Webb, it was like, oh, it's going to launch in 2018. Then it's going to launch in 2020. Then it's going to launch in 2021. So when it finally launched, like, it launched on Christmas Day. And I was like teared up trying to be quiet because it's Christmas Day. It's really early in the morning. It launched from French Guiana, so it's a whole different time zone. But I don't remember what time it was here. I remember being really early here, and I just, like, tears down my eyes when they're like doing the countdown and this thing that I've been talking about, but not just talking about. I know people and scientists that have made this their whole career. Like, there was a scientist at Space Telescope that our offices were close together, and he was on the European side, and he literally moved his family. I forget what country he was from, but he literally moved from Europe to the United States to follow the mission of James Webb. So there's scientists who've dedicated their whole scientific pathways about James Webb. And so there's just a lot of energy around James Webb. I remember James Webb has 18 mirrors, and when the mirrors were being installed at Goddard Flight Center in Maryland, they had a live feed watching them being installed. And I remember, like, the first day they were installing the first few mirrors, and I just was like, why is no one else, like, putting this on the intercoms and, like, talking about it? It was, like, just so exciting, like, watching that happen in real life. And so, again, even though I wasn't part of the science, I know in myself I'll never get an award or a credit, but I know that I contributed in some small way,
Yeah.
at least outreach in outreach in Maryland related to James Webb. And I feel like that is, I don't do this for any credit, but like I feel good in that. I know that I've been able to go and talk to schools. And so James Webb, the amazing science with James Webb, because it sees in infrared, is that it's going to allow us to see further back in time than we've ever been able to see. So if you'd imagine, we can see the universe now, maybe at newborn, or maybe not even at newborn or teenager. With James Webb, we'll be able to see it at like newborn or being birthed, like the whole, like not the whole universe, but like galaxies being formed and different objects within the universe. And so that is like really, really exciting with James Webb.
Okay, so you'll have to excuse my ignorance, okay?
No.
So the telescope allows you to see back in time.
Yes.
What exactly are we seeing?
So it's a lot of things. I'll stay in the vein of like galaxies forming, for instance. So light takes a long time to travel to us, if that concept makes sense. And so even light that we're seeing, if you see something that's, let's say, 5 light years away, that means it's taken 5 years for that light to reach to us. But there are things in our galaxy that are like million light years away or 1,000 light years away. And so just imagine being able to see as early in the universe in our time as possible. I don't know why I chose this, because this is the thing that is really complicated. But just imagine, I always think of it as being able to see us, like if we were able to physically see ourselves from baby to now, right? If you were able to look further back in time, you'd be able to see me. But we don't have it like that, right? We just have pictures. I have pictures around my house when I was a little girl, but we don't have that same thing, obviously, in the universe. But with light, so the thing in astronomy is that we use light for us as information. And so we know that there's a certain basically distance we're able to see back in time. And in infrared, it allows us to see even further. So like invisible light, we can only see so far, right? Like you can see behind me, but you can't see behind like this wall. It wouldn't allow you to see behind the wall. But let's just say, for instance, if infrared was strong enough, infrared would be able to see if there's something heat or something cold behind that wall. And so with infrared, it's seeing just further back in time. And so just imagine we'll be able to see our universe or a galaxy, for instance, when it was a baby. So let's say right now we can only see it when it's an adult, but with infrared light, we'll be able to see it when it's a baby or when it's forming. So as one example of something that James Webb can be able to see.
Okay, so a student who is interested in taking this route and like becoming an astrophysicist, what route would you recommend for someone who kind of knows coming in, like this is what they want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of want to answer. I want to answer that question and answer another question. So the reason why I hesitate to answer that question is because I know that there are not a lot of us, or Black and brown students, that are even aware of astronomy. And so I would say first, like, get interested in it. Like, go to science museums, go and listen to talks. There's a lot of like free things online. And part of why I wanted to get into outreach is to bridge that gap. It's amazing how many times I've gone into a classroom and students weren't even aware anything about Hubble, anything about James Webb. Well, I wouldn't expect them to know about James Webb, but just not concept about the universe at all. And so I would say, like, I guess the reason why it was hard to answer that question initially is that I want more students to be in STEM. I want more students to be excited about STEM, but part of that comes from just being exposed to it. So that's part of it. But if you know for sure that you're wanting to go into physics, unlike I did, I had no idea that I wanted to go into this. What made that transition easy, and I'm going to say easy air quotes because you can't see me visually, was that I had a really, really strong math background. So again, if you're wanting to go into the STEM field, do not skimp on your physics classes. Do not skimp on your calculus classes, your AP classes. Like, that is what made that a lot smoother. It still was really hard, but I know I wouldn't have been as successful if I did not have a strong math background. And so that benefited me being able to overcome in high school that I was not good at math initially. Like, I say this story all the time. Like, I got into wanting to be a math teacher because I saw the way that it was taught. And I saw, I had really amazing teachers. And I also saw different experiences from my classmates. Some had really amazing teachers that were really challenging. And then there were some students, my friends, who said, I'm taking another teacher, X teacher, because they're a lot easier and I could just pass by. But I didn't want that easy route. I wanted the hard teachers because I wanted to really understand the math. And so
Right.
being in STEM, the fundamentals, regardless if you're wanting to be in physics, regardless if you're wanting to do chemistry, biology, chemistry, like my math strength hit, and it really allowed me to navigate. Because again, when you're taking physics, become a physicist, yes, you eventually take a lot of physics classes, but you have to start with your chemistry. You have to start with your physics. Of course, physics. You start with your
Right.
biology. You have to start with the other sciences and having that really strong math background. So I know that it wasn't a direct answer to your question, but if you're wanting to go into this, be I do this activity with my students where we imagine that big thing that you want to be, regardless of titles, regardless of what people are telling you can and can't do,
Hmm.
because I want students to know that to be your center. Because there's going to be a lot in our STEM field, especially if you're Black and brown, that's going to external factors that are going to push against you, that are going to tell you you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you don't have what it takes. All of that is BS. But I would not be Auntie Jess if I did not tell you as students that that is going to happen. But stand strong that you belong to be in STEM. And if you're wanting to do that, again, don't skimp on your math and find your mentors, find your village, find your people. Some of them may be in STEM, like my mentor, who he was in STEM, he was dedicated, he believed in me. Part of why I switched over because he was an amazing scientist in and of himself, but he just believed in me, and his
Mm.
faith in me made me believe in something that I didn't see in myself. And so find people in the field that can support you, and find your village outside of you that can support you, because there are going to be challenges. But if you're wanting to do this, I say this to my students all the time, do it. I want to support you 110%. There's going to be some journeys, there's going to be some hurdles, but find you some people, find your village that you can turn on when things get hard, that you can rely on them. I don't know if that answered your question
No,
directly, but
that's good. You know, as you were speaking, I was remembering a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and I think it's his Outliers book. From reading his book, I recognized where my hang up in math was. And one of the things he talked about was we determine someone's ability to do math based upon speed initially.
yeah, yeah,
And so when I was in elementary school, I struggled with math.
yeah,
And I remember in fifth grade, we had this timed test. So every morning we would have a timed test, and I don't remember how long the time was. It was probably like a 3 minute test, and anything that you didn't complete was marked as wrong. And so for me, some of my struggle and my poor math scores was that I didn't finish.
yeah,
And because I didn't finish, it was marked wrong. And so obviously that counted against me. And it wasn't until probably until I was in high school and I was taking geometry, and I loved it. Like that's when and so to this day, my favorite class in high school was geometry. But it took me so long to get there because,
yeah,
once you perform poorly in math, it holds you back. So
yes,
not doing well in math in elementary school meant that I was not put in algebra in junior high school. And so it just
yeah,
delayed everything. And so I was a high school, I was a senior in high school before I got geometry.
wow,
And so getting into college, I got into college with an exception because I didn't meet the math requirement. So
mm,
astrophysics, like none of this would ever have been an option for me because I was so off track at the very beginning. So the
yeah,
fact that you're a mentor and like you're saying like get the math, find a mentor, like you really
yeah,
have to like develop this skill, this knowledge, like that is something that for me I never had anybody to turn to. Never had a
yeah,
mentor. Never had a teacher that said, "I believe in you. You can do it." In fact, I had quite the opposite. So,
yeah,
like, I just had to just figure things out on my own, which basically meant science and math. It just wasn't going to be it for me because there was no one, there's no help coming. So
yeah.
I'm really I just want to like celebrate you or thank you for the work that you're doing, like being able to be Auntie Jess and being able to have like a mentoring program. So can you tell us a little bit about the program and the work that you do in that regard?
Yeah, you're getting me a little emotional talking about the math. Yes, I of course want to talk about that. I just want to echo something back that you're saying. You're not that it ever went away, but I don't think about it as often in the work that I do because I mainly work with undergraduate students. But I will still always have a passion to work with kindergarten to 12th grade students because, again, why I wanted to be a math teacher was all the things that you just described. So I'm a military brat. I grew up and around it. My dad got in 2 days before I was born. So literally that's all I knew. And I say that to say, when you're in the military, you travel a lot. And so you see the difference. So I was a little different than your story, that when I went to my freshman year in high school, they put me in geometry. And I still don't know to this day, like, why they put me in geometry. But you see, even though we didn't move around as much, you see that different people come into your classrooms and they have different levels, right? Even though we're all ninth grade, we all had different levels of our understanding. And that just like fundamentally bothered me. So that's also why I'm in education. I can talk a whole nother time about like our educational system and why there's a lot of flaws, but a lot of it is what you just spoke to. That if you don't have that, like, I just have to say this, and I'll get on to my Auntie Jess mentoring, like, math is fundamental, regardless if you're going to go into it because you want to be in a science major. Like, it is so fundamental. I use math all the time in my everyday life. And it's not just because I'm a physicist, but I pushed, like, I was stubborn. That was one thing about my stubbornness that worked for me. My obstinance that worked for me was like, I just really wanted to know it, but I did have amazing mentors. An amazing not chemistry, but our geometry teacher who, like, I was coming before class, like I was coming early before school started to meet with her. I was meeting with her at lunchtime sometimes and after school because I really wanted to understand what she was teaching me. But anyways, I can talk a whole other thing about math. I just want to echo, like, that's a lot of, unfortunately, your story is a lot of people's story. And this is why I do what I do, is because STEM is accessible to everyone. Like, I'm telling people all the time, like, you may see me and you may think it's unattainable. It's not. I put in the work. I was a student that wanted to know the knowledge. This is the difference. I was stubborn, but not stubborn with no purpose. It was stubborn with a purpose. It was saying, I really wanted to understand these math concepts. And I don't care if I got a C in the class if I understood the concepts, because math is building. Once you learn one skill, it builds to the next skill. So anyways, that's my soapbox on that. But so what I do in Auntie Jess mentoring, I mentioned to you guys earlier that there are external factors that are going to be pushing against you. There's systematic racism. There's just the field of physics and astronomy is just hostile towards Black people because they're not used to Black people being there. It's very white, male dominated. There's a lot I can say in that, and statistics has proved that. There's only so many PhD astronomers that have actually graduated with a PhD in astronomy over the 2,000 people that actually have astronomy degrees, and that just tells you a lot. So the reason why I do Auntie Jess mentoring and why I've poured into this is because I got tired of the systeming at me. I got tired of the oppression. I got tired of all the things and the reasons of how people told me I wasn't talented, I wasn't good enough, I had to work twice as hard, I had to be twice as smart, right? I know what I'm saying, regardless of the field you're in, probably you can relate to. And I've learned that those external are going to constantly be there. Like, unfortunately, they will. There are some organizations who do better to push it back against those external systems, but through a lot of pain, through a lot of heartache, through a lot of being underneath the table in my desk in my office, closing the door and crying, I realized I wanted to make a change, and I wanted to be the change I wanted to see. And what I noticed is that people, professionals and undergraduate students, don't have a me. They don't have someone that they can turn to and say, hey, a mentor just told me this, or my boss just told me this, or my academic advisor told me I shouldn't go down this pathway. And I just wanted to hold space for our students because I know what they're experiencing. I know what my physics and astronomy students are going to face in some ways. It's not 100%, not because you're Black that everyone's going to experience the same thing, but I guarantee there's some certain things you're going to face. And I wanted to be a tool. I wanted to be a resource. I think I've never said it that way. I don't mean a tool in a bad way, but I wanted to be a mentor, provide resources and tools to students to help support them, not just to survive, but to thrive within STEM fields. So that is what Auntie Jess mentoring is all about. And so if there are students who are going into this in the very beginning and they need advice in their pathways, I'm here to support you. If you're in it and you just need a coach, someone to help guide you, help not just inspire you, but support you. Like I have a mentee. I just was talking about Auntie Jess mentoring show. She was one of my first guests, and she talks often about how she loves that me as her mentor. Like, yes, I can talk to you about the science, but I want to know, did you eat today?
Right.
Have you drinking some water? Are you taking care of yourself? Because we don't get enough of that. Like, again, so my way to push back against the internal is to help support the internal, helping support people become confident in their skills, become confident in who they're called to be. Because again, this field continues to tell you you're not great, and I want to be that internal voice that tells you you are talented, you are needed. There's so much science, if you think about it, that is missing because we're not there.
Yes.
We're not even represented in the numbers, but we're needed. One example I love to give that just seems, it's so simple, and we all maybe can relate to this, is that there is a study. I need to actually give citation to articles, but I've heard it, and I have it, but I have to look it up. But there was this study where there was a scientist, they were doing what is it called? They were testing the dummies with cars. They were like crashing the cars to test the
crash test dummies.
Airbag, the crash, crash. And they were always doing it with the seatbelt related to a male body type, or white male body type at that. So a certain height, a certain weight. And there was a female scientist who said, you're not accounting for a female, one, stature, and you're also not accounting for a female who's pregnant. And so they changed the way, and I don't know the specific of the details, but just that one perspective, that diverse perspective of being a female, diverse perspective of being a female that is pregnant, changed the way that your seatbelt grows across your belly. And I have 2 kids that I call my minions. And I remember when I was pregnant with them, just how uncomfortable that seatbelt was, but also grateful for the way that it laid kind of across my belly because of them, right? So there's small things, but have major impacts, and why diversity is so important. And so that is my Auntie Jess mentoring.
I like that story. So I have a similar story as far as diversity in science. So there was an article that ran in my local paper about an orthodontist who had created braces that were specifically for people of color. And he says, so when he went to school, that the model that's being used to determine, braces, that the model that's being used is European. And so that their teeth are smaller. African Americans have wider teeth. Asian and Hispanics have longer teeth. And so what he noticed is that over the years, that people, their teeth were being overcorrected. If you're a person of color, their teeth were being overcorrected. And therefore, in their older years, it was causing their face to sag because the mouth being fuller and the teeth being pushed too far back was ultimately impacting their appearance over time. So again, it's that diverse perspective in terms of having someone who is in this science and recognizing, like, wait a minute, the model that we're using, the skull we're using, the mouth that we're using is of a European male. So, yeah, same thing. Well, similar thing.
No, it's important. I think this is why I say all the time that we're needed, right? So with my Auntie Jess mentoring, I gave you the links. It's Love Auntie Jess if you're trying to find me across all social media. But I say I do like a midday afternoon check-in, and it seems small, but I didn't get to do it last week. And I had friends messaging me like, we miss you doing this. But I just say simply, like, taking care of ourselves, I'm learning, is that pushback we give to the system. But our genius is needed, and your genius cannot be at its full potential when you're experiencing racism. I tell this all the time to people, especially people that don't look like me, that experiencing microaggressions feels like dying by 1,000 cuts. It hurts. And it's a lot of emotional labor to push back against that when you don't have tools, when you don't have the skills to push back against that. You're left out, and then the system just beats on you. And that's exactly what happened to me. And unfortunately, my story, though there's uniqueness in my story, there's a lot of what I'm saying that happens to a lot of us in this field, but our genius is needed. I think about all the times that I had to go and show up into a job, and the emotional labor I was going into. I was thinking about what I was wearing. I was thinking about what I was saying. I was spending too much time sending an email because I'm thinking about how someone's going to judge my grammar or how I'm saying something. And sometimes, this is my own little side tangent. If you want to cut this out, it's fine. But like, I used to get picked on in my work emails for it's literally a preference of how I'm saying something. Like, it's not really, it doesn't change the facts of what I'm saying. It's semantics and a preference of how you're wanting to say it. And so one example is, I like to be like short, brief, to the point in emails. I don't like long emails. I think people don't read long emails. They're just a drag. So I'm going to give you, hey, how are you doing? Maybe some pleasantry, ask you for the thing I need to ask you, maybe give you when I need it, and then like, have a great day, because no one's going to read these long emails. But I've had some places that are okay with that. I've had some places that you have to explain it and add it. I don't want to. But the contrast to this is, I always say, at one of my jobs, the director of the institution we were working for, he was brief, short, to the point. You emailed him, it may be a couple of sentences, or not even a couple of sentences, a couple of words. Or there's times when he just said yes or no to what I was saying to him. But it's okay, right? Because he's a white male. He has way more power. He has way more privilege than me. And he's the director of the organization. So no one's going to come back to him and say that you can't have short emails. But because of me, a Black female, like, that's unacceptable. You can't do that. And so anyways, I say all this to say, like, I've learned with Auntie Jess and why I do what I do. And not just with Auntie Jess, all of the work that I do related to my business is fighting against this external system that keeps pushing upon us, and being a part of organizations that truly want to make change. And so if there are organizations who are working with students, you may not know, like, that is an okay thing to say, like, I actually don't know what to do. Bring in the experts who can tell you, like me, what to do and how truly we can support students. We don't want to just increase the number of Black and brown students in STEM, but we're not ensuring that we're supporting them holistically. And that that internal pushback is that holistic approach. Are we making sure that they have representation, that they see people like them, right? We know this, I forget who said it, but you can't be what you don't see, right? So even though my mentor was Chinese, actually, I didn't mention this, his ethnicity, but he was Chinese, but he still believed in me, and I still saw myself in him in some ways because he was pouring into me. He had like unwavering like faith within me. And then throughout, unfortunately, there's not a lot of Black physicists that are out there, but I saw a few, and they were enough representation for me, like, yes, I can do this. And so that representation really matters. And I keep saying this, but I feel it really strongly that, like, our genius is needed, right? Our genius is needed without the system telling us that we're not good enough. Just imagine what we can create, what we can accomplish when you don't have to worry about a microaggression going into the workplace, or you don't have to dim your light to show up in a place because people are telling you you're too loud and you're too whatever. Like, just even you were talking about the story of the hygienist with the braces. Like, there's so many other scientists and other people that I follow on social media, because I like not just astronomy but others, but there's so much more that's coming out like that, right? Just even when it comes to something as simple as your body mass index, right? Like, that's different for Black people than it is for white people, right? And so the way that you treat them is different. So anyways, those perspectives are different, but it's not going to change. And this is maybe my one last thing related to this. Like, the system won't change unless you're in it making it change. And so sometimes it means that I've experienced a lot of challenges, a lot of external pressure, a lot of people telling me what I couldn't do. But if I don't show up, the system's never going to change. I've been a part of some of the first diversity groups at almost all of the organizations I've been a part of, bringing this perspective, bringing that diversity matters, bringing statistics, bringing data, that this stuff really matters, and being a part of the policies that were part of it. But again, if I weren't there, right, it's trade-offs. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I had to deal with showing up in that space, but it was worth it, because I want to believe with my business, with Auntie Jess, that I'm making change in the lives of those that are around me. I want to make everyone that I encounter to feel seen, to feel valued, to feel that they are needed. Like, that is my mission. And I know I've done that, and I'm going to keep doing that. And that's the legacy that I want to leave here on this earth.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for the work you're doing. When you talked about the body mass index, like, totally not the point. But when you talked about even the body mass index, I think about the office temperature. It's like, who
Oh,
said that this is the best temperature? It's freezing in here. Whose body is this calibrated for?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things like that are, especially in our health system. I'm not in the health system, but I think about that often. Even about being, overweight. Again, that index, right? Like Black people, body types are more just the weight, right? The weight on the scale. I'm going to deem overweight than a different body type of a female. And I remember this distinctly being a young girl, of course, coming into age, 12, 13 years old, where I had a little bit more curves and a little bit more hips and but I was still really skinny. And I don't remember what my body mass index or if they even deemed that I was overweight, but I'll never forget that experience, just physically looking different, obviously, than my white counterparts, the other white students within my class. I just looked different. I'm built different.
Hmm.
But it didn't mean I was overweight or I didn't look good. It's just I was built different. But there again, our fields have a certain norm, right? I know I'm preaching to the choir, but they have a certain norm. It's what we see. It's what we see in the news. Is what we see in movie and TV shows, right? So that's why that other perspective is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as we're closing up here, I do have a final question for you, and that is, what brings you hope in this space?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for answering that question because I want to leave with hope. I know I said a lot of maybe things that may seem discouraging. My hope is that there is change. I'm one person, but there are a lot of people who are genuine, who are great allies, who are really wanting change within our STEM fields. There are amazing programs and nonprofits who are supporting students to be successful in our field. And so all hope is not lost. It is possible to be in this field. It is possible to thrive within this field. Again, it's just so important to find your people, find your village. And so that's my hope is uh, again, I went through a lot to come to a breaking point where I wanted to divert my energy, and diverting my energy turned into creating my own business that said, I want for the rest of my life to be a part of this system that's growing, that's supporting us, the people that look like me. It's supporting the systems, right? So I work with organizations, nonprofits, and different places that are wanting to do this work. And so that is my hope. There are people who get it and actually willing to put money where their mouth is to make the change. And so just know if you're wanting to be in STEM, that's really bad English, but there are people, there is a village out here that wants to support you, and just keep leaning into that and finding the village. If you need help finding the village, reach out to me. I'll help you, point you into the right direction. But there's hope. There's so much great that we can do. And the one that was kind of generic, the one specific thing that I want to say that gives me hope is I was just a part of a process last week where I was giving advice to a NASA panel, and it was related to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm.
And it was one of the first that I've ever been a part of. And just knowing that me and my other panelists were making a difference. It may be small, but it's making a difference. And just my students, when they come back to me and say, Auntie Jess, thank you so much. Just your words of encouragement, just knowing that you had my back. I just had a student reach out to me who told me some really great news they can't publish, they can't put out publicly, but they were like, Auntie Jess, I wanted you to be one of the first people to know, knowing that just me being who I am makes a difference is my hope. And I know that I'm making impact on the people around me, and that gives me hope every single day.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the work that you do. How can students find you? Tell us where they can reach you online or social media.
Yeah, so you can reach me on my website, jessicaaharris.com, and it links to all my social media. If you're trying to find me with Auntie Jess, it's on Instagram, it's Love Auntie Jess. On Twitter, it's Love Auntie Jess. On Facebook, it's Auntie Jess Love. And so, but you can find all of those links on my website at jessicaaharris.com.
All right. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing your story, coming on the Academic Survival Podcast. I know that there are some STEM students or students who didn't know that they wanted to go down this path that will hear your story and be encouraged and be inspired, because there's a way forward and there is a support system, at least in you, and that there's others out there they can find. So thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you.
That's it for today on Academic Survival. If you want to share your story on how you survived your freshman year of college, you can reach me at info@shandralmcdonald.com. We'll be back next week with more ways to survive your academic journey. Until then, happy studying.